Nolan Wells vanished in the water near Horn Island, and the forensic timeline around the Triton vessel still does not make sense. The emergency call described a sinking boat, but the Coast Guard response window overlaps with an AIS gap, disputed movement, and a possible evidence preservation failure. That is why the Nolan Wells case no longer reads like a simple boating accident. It reads like a crime scene, defined as much by what happened as by what did not happen. Start with the first claim the public heard. The Triton vessel was reportedly taking on water. The crew needed help. The location was dangerous. The clock was running. On paper, that sequence should create a clean rescue narrative. But clean rescue narratives leave clean records, clear location data, clear movement history, clear distress behavior, clear preservation of evidence. The Nolan Wells timeline offers none of that. The first block of evidence is digital visibility. In any marine emergency, the automatic identification system is not a side detail. It is the map. It is the trail. It is the difference between memory and measurement. And according to the central public claim surrounding this case, the Triton vessel's AIS went inactive during a critical window when Nolan Wells was in the water. Every piece of that can have an innocent explanation in isolation. Equipment can fail, power can drop, operators can make mistakes. But when the innocent explanation requires ignoring the exact timing, the exact danger, and the exact value of the missing signal, it stops being the most convincing answer. Because if the Triton vessel was genuinely desperate for rescue, the missing signal is not a random inconvenience. The missing signal becomes the event. It creates an operational window, a period where later statements matter more than live telemetry, a period where route reconstruction becomes less precise, a period where accountability becomes softer. Then look at the geography. Horn Island is not just a scenic label in this case. Horn Island is part of the logic. Shoals, sand ridges, shallow edges, broken lines of sight, weak cellular overlap, pockets where movement becomes harder to verify in real time. That matters because several of the most important questions in the Nolan Wells case are geographic questions, not emotional ones. Where exactly was the Triton vessel when Nolan Wells was separated from the boat? Where did the Triton vessel slow down? Where did the Triton vessel idle? Where did the Triton vessel regain clear communication? This is where evidence stacking becomes important. One unusual clue is noise. Two unusual clues are concern. Three unusual clues in sequence become pattern. First, the AIS gap. Second, the location profile near Horn Island. Third, the uncertainty around what the Triton vessel was doing during the most critical minutes. A distressed vessel is supposed to become easier to find. The Triton vessel appears to have become harder to define. Now move from the water to the dock. Public attention turned to the crew's return to Jackson County because post-incident behavior can either reinforce a timeline or quietly undermine it. Trauma is not uniform. Nobody should pretend there is a single correct way to react to crisis. But behavioral analysis does not work by guessing feelings. Behavioral analysis compares claimed experience to visible regulation. If a person reports an extreme, life-threatening emergency and the observable presentation is unusually controlled, unusually measured, or unusually flat, investigators note that mismatch. And in the Nolan Wells case, that mismatch is one of the reasons this story refuses to settle. Not because posture proves guilt, it does not. Not because silence proves intent, it does not. But because crisis usually leaves residue. Disorganized speech, breathing instability, fragmented recall, adrenaline aftershock, physical depletion. When the public sees a claimed emergency and does not see the expected residue, The burden shifts back to the timeline. Then comes the most important investigative concept in this case: absence. Not what was said, what was not said. Not what was shown, what was not shown. Not what was preserved, what was not preserved. No uninterrupted tracking trail. No complete certainty on vessel positioning during the key window. No universally accepted sequence for how Nolan Wells became unrecoverable. No fully settled explanation for why later interpretation depends so heavily on statements instead of machine records. No clean chain, no closed loop, no stable ending. That absence matters because absence in an investigation is not neutral. Sometimes absence is accidental. Sometimes absence is procedural failure. And sometimes absence creates exactly enough ambiguity for everyone involved to retreat into plausible deniability. The witness issue fits into that framework. A reported island witness account has circulated because it addresses the one question every official summary struggles with: what the Triton vessel actually did while Nolan Wells was still in the water. The severe versions of that claim suggest Nolan Wells may not have received immediate, effective re-entry assistance. That allegation cannot be treated as established fact. It must be tested against route data, timing, physical conditions, and all available statements. But it cannot be dismissed simply because it is uncomfortable. If a witness account aligns with the unexplained pause, the communication gap, and the later behavioral mismatch, then that account becomes more than rumor. It becomes a reconstruction pressure point. And pressure points matter because they change how professionals read a case. A water fatality can begin as a rescue failure, then become a negligence review, then become a statement analysis case, then become an evidence preservation case. The Nolan Wells file appears to move through all four. The next block is digital behavior after the emergency window. Public discussion has repeatedly raised concerns about deleted communications, reset devices, or missing activity trails. No responsible investigator would confuse rumor with extraction, but no responsible investigator would ignore the pattern either. In modern cases, the secondary crime scene is often not the shoreline, it is the phone, the app history, the location permission logs, the sync records, the failed uploads, the timestamp gaps. And again, absence is doing the work. No complete confidence in the communications trail. No fully transparent public understanding of device activity. No obvious indication that the priority after the event was maximum preservation. That matters because panic has a texture, and post-incident management has a different one. Panic is messy. Panic contradicts itself. Panic leaks. Management narrows. Management stabilizes language. Management reduces variables. If the Nolan Wells case was chaotic on the water, but strangely disciplined after the water, that contrast may be the key to everything. This is where many retellings make a mistake. They jump to a dramatic hidden villain. They introduce a massive conspiracy in the final minute. They turn uncertainty into fiction. But the most realistic explanation is colder than that and more believable. The Nolan Wells case may not require a cinematic mastermind. The Nolan Wells case may only require a brief operational window, a compromised record, and a series of choices made after the fact by people who understood exactly how dangerous clarity would be. That theory is foreshadowed from the beginning. The AIS gap creates the first window. The Horn Island geography protects the second. The behavioral mismatch raises the third. The possible digital irregularities widen the fourth. By the time the story reaches Jackson County, the core issue is no longer only what happened to Nolan Wells in the water. The core issue is whether the most important minutes were followed by narrative stabilization ends of full transparency. And that is why every innocent explanation feels weaker when viewed alone. Yet the overall sequence feels stronger when viewed together. A signal loss can be innocent. A confusing route can be innocent. A controlled demeanor can be innocent. Missing digital context can be innocent. But when the entire chain asks the public to accept every innocent explanation at once, in the exact same case, during the exact same fatal window, skepticism becomes the rational position. The most chilling possibility in the Nolan Wells case is not a dramatic theory. It is a procedural one. That Nolan Wells entered the water during a crisis. That the Triton vessel then moved through a period of reduced visibility. That key evidence was not captured, not preserved, or not released in a way that would close the loop. And that the result was not a solved event, but an administratively survivable version of events. So here is the one question that matters most now. What would the unreleased device extraction timeline show during the exact AIS blackout involving the Triton vessel near Horn Island? Not the public retelling, not the dockside statements. The device timeline, the background pings, the connection attempts, the exact minutes Nolan Wells was still recoverable. Tell me what you think that missing digital record would reveal: panic, negligence, or deliberate narrative control.